What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, December 21st, 2016, middle of the weekday, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday and another Christmas weekend. We're coming up on Christmas here, and we've finally got all of our Christmas shopping done, and there's always a name that you forget out there, but we're out there, and I think a lot of people are feeling very festive with the recent turns of events in the news, especially over in Aleppo. And anyway, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. In fact, I'm going to tell you very honestly, I may not be able to take a lot of phone calls because I have so much to share with you today. But the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Now, I want to start off with this really bizarre story coming out of Politico. And as you know, Donald Trump has announced he's keeping his own private security along with the United States Secret Service protective detail. And Robert Reich went out there on Facebook and said, this is the sure sign that Trump is going to be a tyrannical dictator. He's got his own security. And basically trying to make it look like this is all a bad thing, and how dare he have his own security, and he shouldn't have his own security. He should rely on the United States Secret Service protective detail. And he's out there accusing Trump's private security of all kinds of attacks on protesters, which is not true. And remember, during the altercations where Trump had to be protected, it was his private security and not the Secret Service that protected him. There was the line jumper with the knife, the gentleman with the gun, a couple of other incidents like that. And let us not forget that when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, his entire Secret Service detail stood down. We've all seen the James Altgen's photo of the moment Kennedy is being shot in the throat, the Secret Service on the car following him have not moved. And 2 cars back, Vice President Johnson's Secret Service, they're out of the car already. They heard the gunshots. They're rushing to cover the Vice President. And we've all seen that video at the Dallas airport when Air Force One arrived, and the Secret Service agents that were supposed to be riding on the sideboard of the presidential limousine were told to stand down. And you can see the Secret Service agents going, what? This isn't going to work. And let us not forget Indira Gandhi, who was assassinated by her own security detail. So one has to wonder if Robert Reich wants to open the door to a potential assassination of Donald Trump. I think Trump is very wise to keep his own security detail, given how many people in the establishment absolutely hate him. Now then, there's good reason for Donald Trump to not trust the Secret Service. First of all, a few years ago, when they were checking Claire and I out while Obama was out here for Christmas, they didn't impress me. The guy was easy to spot, very nervous. Maybe they were using us for a training mission or something. But we know that there's been a lot of scandals with the Secret Service. They're, drinking on duty, prostitutes, literally drunk driving one of their cars into the White House barricades. And we put up a whole bunch of these stories, including that story of Tariq and Michelle Salahi, who crashed Obama's first state dinner, got right past the Secret Service, and then used their notoriety to get a little reality TV show going, which went absolutely nowhere. There was the person who jumped the fence, got into the East Room before the Secret Service caught him. And then there was the guy who opened fire on the White House. The Secret Service thought it was a car backfiring and stood down. They didn't even realize the White House had been fired on for 4 days until housekeeping noticed a broken window. So, yeah, I think Donald Trump has a legitimate reason to have his own second layer of security. I think it's a very, very wise thing for him to be doing right now. Now then, As you know, the let's blame Russia for everything is still continuing. And Donna Brazile, the head of the Democratic National Committee, is out there saying, by now Americans know beyond any reasonable doubt that the Russian government has executed cyber attacks on political campaigns and blah, 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 blah. In point of fact, the Americans don't know that at all. According to the latest polls, most Americans aren't falling for this. Most Americans understand this is the church of the liberalologists, still following the most holy dictum of never accepting responsibility for their own shortcomings and failings. And apparently there was this story circulating around about how Obama had used the red phone to warn Putin of armed conflict if hacking continues. And, of course, the Russians have come on back and said, this is ridiculous. You know, it's not like the red phone isn't used on a regular basis. Obama and Putin talk all the time on it. That's really what it's there for. And this idea of armed conflict if the hacking continues. Fortunately, the election is over, and they can't go on saying Russia's still hacking us. But it is rather ridiculous. We're going to take a second here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And here's really what it comes all down to, and probably the reason why the American people aren't buying this latest batch of bovine excrement coming out of the government and the corporate media. Intelligence agencies make their living by lying. They lie to the enemy. They lie to each other. They lie to their superiors. They lie to the public. Why should we believe them now just because they're out there saying Hillary Clinton's election was stolen by the Russians? Based on the past track record, nobody should take anything the CIA, or for that matter, the FBI, says at face value. And again, the polls are showing they're not getting traction with this. The government and the corporate media have destroyed their credibility with the American people. They're not going to get it back with more lies, which is why they're trying to find some way to trick the independent media into some kind of a misstep that can be used to discredit them, because that's the only tactic they've got. And, of course, the way we're going to fight back, first of all, we can fight back in the courts, and I understand Alex Jones is moving ahead with his lawsuits against the major media for implying that the independent media are all arms of the Russian propagandists. And if it goes class action, I will definitely sign on to that one. And meantime, the other thing we can do is dig back into all the old YouTube videos of when the corporate media was caught lying and just share them all over social media. They want to declare war on us based on who is trustworthy and not. We have got tons and tons of ammunition on our side. So we reposted the video of CNN's Bob Beckel and his predictions for the 2016 election. Donald Trump only has a 1 to 2% chance, and just on and right up to the election itself. And then we posted another video also from CNN where they faked a satellite interview between two of their prostitutes. And they're on the headsets and saying, oh, there's a delay, we're talking here, we're talking there. And it turns out they're in the same parking lot. And you know that because in the background of one of the shots, you see this red truck and a bus drive by, and then a second later, it goes through the background of the other person's camera. They just faked it. Not too surprisingly, Gallup just ran a poll and discovered that the number of Americans who think the media have low or no ethical standards shot up by 10% since 2009. And that is a very telling indicator. And given that it's Gallup, I expect the number might actually be higher. And we know that corporate media doesn't have ethics or morality. They demonstrated that this year. And don't forget that Fox News synthetic bovine growth hormone lawsuit, where Fox News assigned two reporters to do a puff piece on Monsanto's new synthetic bovine growth hormone and what a wonderful thing it was for the meat and dairy industry, and it's going to be great. And these two reporters, who actually did have a sense of ethics, which is a fatal disease in the corporate media, came on back and said, there's a problem. People who are eating the meat and dairy products from the treated cows are getting these strange medical ailments. And Fox News said, will you just take that out? And the reporter said, no, we're not going to take that out. This is a serious problem we're dealing with here. And Fox News ultimately fired them. The reporters sued for wrongful termination, and they lost on appeal when the courts pointed out there is no law requiring the corporate media to be truthful with you, the American public, and that therefore corporate media management can order their correspondents and prostitutes to lie to you, and if the correspondents and prostitutes refuse to lie to you, they can be fired for cause legally. They can be fired for telling the truth. And that right there tells you, institutionally, the corporate media has no morals and no ethics at all. Now, as you know, the establishment is in a panic. They've lost their ability to lie to the people with impunity. And without that, they don't know what to do because they've been getting by with lies, fraud, and deception so long, they don't actually know any other way to run a country. And over in Germany, the Merkel government is pushing for a new law that will punish, quote, wrong opinions, end quote. And for those of you who are students of history, this goes right back to the 1930s and the rise of the Nazi Party and the German information laws, where you could be thrown in jail for having a wrong opinion about what's going on in the world. And, of course, it was the heyday of the book burning, which we're seeing the digital equivalent of that in this effort to try and ban independent media websites or block them or hack them to take them on down. Reminds me of that coffee mug we have available in our online store. The fastest way to bring down a dictatorship is to force them to act like one where everybody can see it. And remember, Holocaust researcher Ernst Zundel was thrown in jail for the crime of disseminating false news in Canada. And what was very revealing about this, and it was an 800-year-old law that had never been used in Canada, but they dug it up and said, you're spreading false news. We say it's false news. And the judge in the case actually told Ernst Zundel, I don't care if your evidence is true and accurate, it is still a crime for you to say these things. In other words, the lies are enshrined and protected by the law, and the truth tellers are heretics. Burn them at the stake. They're telling the truth. Burn them. Burn them. It's a very, very dangerous and dark time here. Now, turning over to politics and corruption, one of my favorite subjects, of course. Liz Wheeler was interviewing Charles Ortel, talking about the Clinton Foundation and whether it should be investigated. And Liz Wheeler asked him, has the Clinton Foundation committed a crime? And Charles Ortel comes back and says, it's more than one. And that in point of fact, the total ill-gotten gain take of the Clinton Foundation may be into the trillions. Nobody knows because nobody's allowed to look. We also posted a video of interviews that were taken down in Haiti following the earthquake. Remember all that money the Clinton Foundation solicited? We're going to help those people of Haiti. And this is a video of the people down in Haiti saying, we haven't seen a penny of it. We haven't seen any of it. And the people of Haiti are convinced the Clintons are criminals because they scooped up all this money that was on its way to Haiti, diverted it into the Clinton Foundation, and it pretty much vanished. The only money that actually showed up in Haiti went down there to buy up property at pennies on the dollar for resort development. That was it. And talking about the liberal media jumping the shark, this is a good one. Women's magazine Elle has actually said that Ivanka Trump is dangerous to women because she's exceptional. See, all these liberal feminist magazines and everything, they're pandering to women to say it's not your fault that you're not successful. There's an evil male patriarchy. They're keeping you down. You're a victim. Give us your money and your support. Buy our books and coffee mugs and tea cozies, and we will work to open up opportunities for you. Then you have somebody come along like Ivanka, who is beautiful, brilliant, educated. Yes, she's had advantages by birth in terms of the money, but obviously an exceptional individual. And that's a threat to that whole victimhood that feminism has been selling women since the 1990s. Far from empowering women, feminism has turned them into another victim class. for political exploitation. And that's why Ivanka Trump is a danger to women. No, she isn't. She should be an inspiration. But if she is, if women start saying, oh, well, if she can do it, I can, they're going to stop listening to the liberals and feminist propaganda and go on out and make a life for themselves that they can feel good about, rather than sit at home feeling miserable and going along with this, oh, we have to blame the evil white males for our problems here. And that's getting out of hand as well. I'll just talk about the world would be so much better if we just gas all the white males. Now let's turn to those assassinations. Everybody's pointing fingers. Everybody is coming up with theories about what's going on. One came out of Matrix Bob asking if the assassination of Russia's ambassador and that Berlin market attack are some part of a plan to get World War III going before Donald Trump takes office. And they're making the same point that I was making before. We're in Archduke Franz Ferdinand territory right now, which was the spark that ignited World War I as a war between Austria-Hungary and Serbia, and then somehow we were all told Germany was actually our enemy. So we're not sure what's going on. I did mention yesterday, in the month that remains before Trump takes office, we're going to see a lot of people pushing their agendas, trying to get them into irrevocable status before Trump can take office. But again, Trump could pull a fast one on them, because he's not a career politician. He's not as obsessed with his historical legacy as career politicians. I'm sure he has a view to how he's going to be remembered in the history books. But there's nothing stopping Trump on his first day in office from picking up the phone with Russia or China and say, you know, this war thing is stupid. Let's call it off. And Putin would agree immediately. They're already sending signals to each other that they're not going to let this happen. Now, was the U.S. involved going through the Fethullah Gulen organization? Maybe, because just 6 days prior to the assassination of the Russian ambassador, the former deputy director of the CIA, who served as acting director twice, Michael Morell, called for the U.S. to respond to alleged Russian meddling in the U.S. election by retaliating in a way that was both overt and painful to Putin. Do you realize the mindset that's going on here? Back to the days of witch hunts. Oh, witches are real. I think you're one. We're going to burn you. That's it. I don't need any evidence. I have God on my side. Another indicator of U.S. foreknowledge is 4 weeks ago, the State Department issued warnings to American citizens in Europe not to attend European Union Christmas holiday markets. Now, the Turkish government has imposed a complete media blackout on the assassination of the Russian ambassador because they're trying to link it to the Fethullah Gulen movement. And that's been complicated by the fact that al-Nusra is now claiming responsibility for the assassination. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. A lot of these small little terrorist groups like to take credit for things that happen. It makes them look better. But that makes the U.S. look bad because al-Nusra is the #1 rebel group that the U.S. has been supporting in Syria in their efforts to oust Bashar al-Assad. Complicating that is another faction, Jaish al-Fatah, is claiming they did it. And I can almost see this image of al-Nusra and Jaish al-Fatah, in a steel cage death match, beating each other up. No, we killed him. No, we killed him. No, we killed him. You go away. You're a bunch of pansies. It really is getting ridiculous out there. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the assassination of the Russian ambassador in Ankara, Turkey. Turkish police have already arrested 13 additional suspects they feel are tied to the Russian ambassador's murder. Now, remember, according to the Jerusalem Post, the actual assassin was under investigation for links to the Fethullah Gulen organization in the United States of America. So they may be rolling up a network, or it may just be an opportunity for Erdogan to clean house. Meanwhile, Turkish prosecutors are asking, and a lot of people are asking this, why they didn't take the assassin alive. He was cornered. He didn't have an escape route. They could have just sat down and waited him out. But Erdogan is defending the police actions. Meanwhile, the United States has now officially denied any involvement in the assassination of the Russian envoy. And you know the old wisdom in Washington, D.C., never believe anything until it's been officially denied. Now, here's where it gets a little bit sick and twisted, because over at the New York Daily News, they have this columnist who came on out trying to make a case saying that this was a good thing to assassinate Russian diplomats. And he compared the Russian ambassador Andrei Karlov to Ernst von Rath, the Nazi ambassador to France who was assassinated in 1938. So Kunchman is the guy who wrote this, is out there saying this is a good thing. We should be assassinating Russian diplomats around the world. Now, of course, assassinating diplomats is tacky. It's a violation of international diplomacy. And again, it does seem like they want this thing to ramp up. Now then, there has been another incident of a minivan plowing through a market. This one was in Beijing. It was a farmer's market at 3 in the afternoon, but at this point, the Chinese authorities are saying this was not an act of terror. The driver was Chinese. It just appeared that he was going too fast and lost control of the van. So my question is, how many more people must die before we ban vans? Or at least have a 15-day waiting period for vans. They're nothing but killing machines. They serve no useful purpose. It's time to ban the van, as it were. Now, turning over to the situation in Syria, Turkey, Russia, and Iran have had their three-way meeting about what's going to happen in Syria. Sergei Lavrov, Russia's foreign minister, made the phone call to U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry to basically say, we've had our meeting, we've reached an agreement, and we think we can calm this thing down, and no, you're not invited. Well, it looks like the U.S. is trying to find another way to get back into Syria, because now they're up there at the United Nations pushing through a resolution for a humanitarian mission into Syria. And as the Russian observers have pointed out, this resolution doesn't actually say who's going to be in charge of the humanitarian effort. Now, right now, the only outside country that's actually engaged in humanitarian support into Syria is, of course, Russia. They're bringing in something like 80 tons of food every single day. But this may be the U.S. attempt. We're coming into Syria. The UN says we can come on in on our humanitarian mission. Again, this is probably the way that Obama is going to stall the final collapse of Syria until Trump is in office. Because Obama doesn't want the loss of Syria on his legacy, his historical record, because it's going to be the biggest U.S. military defeat since Vietnam. Meanwhile, the Syrian army is closing in on the last of the Aleppo rebel holdouts, and it's only a matter of time. It's only a matter of time. Now, we were talking the other day about how Egyptian police arrested a photographer who was faking photos of wounded children, claiming that this was coming out of Aleppo, it was being flooded onto social media to convince everybody, Russia and Syria are doing all these horrible, terrible things, and, that's why the U.S. has to go on back in and save these poor, suffering civilians of Aleppo. Well, if the U.S. cared about the civilians of Syria, they wouldn't have started this whole war 5 years ago. All right, we got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And a very alert listener wrote in to remind me that this New York Daily News reporter, Gersh Kuntzman, who just wrote this article saying it's a good thing to go out and kill Russian ambassadors, is the same guy who wrote the article about what a terrible, traumatic experience it was firing the AR-15 and how much it, harmed him and scared him, and that nobody should want to touch one of these things. So a little bit of a double standard. He doesn't want you to have AR-15s, but yeah, let's go kill those Russian ambassadors. Well, Gersh, if you really feel that way, here's your rifle, here's your parachute, and we'll call Putin and tell him to be on the lookout for you. Now, getting on back to the story I was talking about before we hit the commercial break, Egyptian police had arrested this photographer for faking photos of wounded children that were blasted all over social media and even the corporate media as proof, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more, of atrocities committed by Russia and Syria against the civilians in Aleppo, thereby justifying somebody coming on in and telling them to leave and taking over, meaning the United States of America. Well, Egypt has now upped the ante. They have now arrested 5 people in Port Said, making fake photos and fake videos to be used as anti-Syria propaganda. So that is all starting to unravel. According to an article over at daisyluther.com, saying that these staged photos are showing people exactly what they want to see, meaning the world leaders and the people in the corporate media. Oh, these are pictures showing what we want to sell, horror and blood and death and wounded children. And every time they get caught at another one of these, the credibility of the corporate media declines, and they stand up and scream, oh, it's all the fault of the independent media. How dare they tell the truth on us? It's restraint of trade. They're cutting into our business. Our business is lying. And if they're interfering with that, we should sue them for restraint of trade, because that's our trade, lying for money here. Now, the reality on the ground is that Christmas has come early to Aleppo, and the party is definitely on. Bands and choirs in the street, celebration. They even put up this huge Christmas tree. Unfortunately, that was marred by a suicide bomber who came on in and blew it up, because, by golly, the people in Aleppo aren't supposed to be seen as happy and celebrating. They're supposed to be miserable so we can go and invade again. We're starting to get a tally now of what this covert war in Syria through ISIS and Al-Qaeda has been costing. The New Eastern Outlook website has an article by French investigative reporter Jean Perrier, basically saying the United States has spent $1.5 billion with a B acquiring weapons that are of Russian or other origin to smuggle into ISIS and Al-Qaeda in order to allow the United States deniability. And if you are a fan of the movie Charlie Wilson's War, you'll recognize the play again. When Charlie Wilson went on in and said, we're going to back the Mujahideen against the Soviet Union and get them out of there, they had to go around and buy weapons from Israel and from Egypt and captured Russian weapons from all these other people, so that when the Mujahideen were caught, there wasn't anything that linked them directly back to the United States. Well, guess what? The cover is already blown. And we know that's what they've been doing. And this transfer of weapons and money and supplies from the U.S. to these terrorist groups has been confirmed over and over and over again through some of the leaked emails, through documents recovered through congressional investigations, Judicial Watch lawsuits. This is the true reality of what the U.S. government has been up to. And they have concealed what they're doing from you, who are expected to pay for it all, and in some cases sacrifice the lives of your children, with the complete complicity of the corporate media. Now, as you know, the U.S. is ramping up sanctions against Russia in response to their cyber attacks on our election system, which, again, nobody can prove. And again, if Russia had that capability, Poroshenko wouldn't have won his election. We wouldn't have had 8 years of Obama, would we? It just doesn't make any sense. Russia is basically saying, at this point, almost all communication between Russia and the U.S. is frozen, except for Obama calling up and saying, if you hack our systems, we're going to declare war on you. They're really pushing as hard as they can for a war before Donald Trump can take office. Donald Trump, on the other hand, just sent a very clear message, because somebody leaked out, probably intentionally, a Pentagon memo detailing Donald Trump's defense priorities, and, of course, it's terror and various other situations. Russia is not on that list. Russia is not a defense priority for President Trump. He's sending a message to Putin saying, stay calm, it's only one more month, and then we'll be out of this mess. Now, the former CIA interrogator who actually interrogated Saddam Hussein has now gone public, basically blowing the lid off the U.S. official story, like it hadn't already been blown off several times before, with basically what Saddam was saying about weapons of mass destruction and how it all made a great deal of sense that he didn't have those things and certainly was not going to use them. Remember when phony Tony Blair was out there saying Iraq could attack us in just 45 minutes? Why would they do that, Tony? I don't know. Because they're crazy Middle Eastern people. And, of course, this gets back to the article I wrote called The Lie of the Century, now The Lie of the Last Century. And pointing out here that every time George W. Bush and the U.S. government told you another lie about Saddam's weapons of mass destruction, the corporate media fed it to you without question. And now they have the gall to point fingers at the independent media and say, we are the fake news. You can see the uphill battle they're facing right now. They've got a long, long history of lies and deceptions against the American people. They are constrained by their masters from being truthful. The only tactic they've got, and I'm sure they're working on it right now, is to try and plant something on the independent media that can be used to embarrass us, discredit us, or even worse, set us up for defamation lawsuits that would sue us all out of existence. So we have to be very, very, very careful. We have to be the professional journalists that the corporate journalists stopped being decades ago. Now, do you remember back during this whole attempt to ramp up racial tension to support Hillary Clinton's run for the office, and Walmart refused to carry a T-shirt that said, "All Lives Matter." Actually, it was a bumper sticker, because Walmart thought the statement, "All Lives Matter," was offensive. It's offensive to say all lives matter. But Walmart has now officially signed on to sell trademarked Black Lives Matter apparel. Hypocrisy? I mean, that's it. Black Lives Matter, we can sell that. All Lives Matter, oh, that's offensive. That's offensive because we know all lives don't matter. Especially you white heterosexual males. You've all got to go away. That's a commandment from the first church of the liberalologists. I have to start doing some graphics about that here. All right, let's talk about the economic news here. The Monte Paschi private bailout has basically collapsed, and it went on out where they couldn't get any help from outside. IMF said no, ECB said no, World Bank said no. So Monte Paschi went back to their primary investors and backers and said, we need you to put more money in. And these anchor investors said, I don't think we can do that because it's roughly the equivalent of taking our money and dumping it into the toilet and flushing twice. Well, the private bailout has now failed, and Italy is going to nationalize Monte Paschi. And Financial Times is writing, the Italian government will take a stake between 50 and 70% in Monte dei Paschi, which is up from the government of Italy's current 4% stake. That'll give the government functional control over the Monte Paschi bank. And this is causing some concern in other parts of the European Union, particularly in Germany, which is a critic of state bailouts of banking institutions. Because Germany understands that the more you take from the people to give the banks to prop them up, the less the people have to carry on commerce from which the banks could actually earn money the old-fashioned way. So it's a one-way trip to eventual disaster. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Bob in Las Vegas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Feliz Navidad, Mike. Feliz Navidad.
Melikalikimaka.
Okay, thank you. First, I'd like to say it's been extremely cold here in Vegas lately, so another cold winter is expected. So more good news for Al Gore.
Yeah, I understand some other parts of the country. It's so cold, the flashers are just recycling their selfies from last year.
Mike, first, did you hear about Trump's recent dinner with Carlos Slim, the Mexican multi-billionaire who's the majority owner of the New York Times?
I'd heard they'd had a dinner, and my guess is that Donald Trump is going to be trying to reform the corporate media from within, and because again, Trump knows the media is adversarial going into his administration, and he wants that problem to go away.
Well, I think there were some words, not exchanged, but I think Trump had said some negative things about Slim, and I think he wanted to, get together with him, make up. But I'm just surprised that a savvy businessman like Slim, even though he's part of a crony capitalist system in Mexico, I'm surprised a savvy guy like him would even invest in the New York Times and, not invest in an independent media outlet. I don't know what he sees in the New York Times.
Well, what he sees there's a couple of possible explanations. First of all, from a business point of view, it doesn't make any sense. The New York Times is losing money. They're having to close 8 floors of their own building and turn them into rental office space to try and stay in the black here. But it could be that this individual down in Mexico is being used as a cutout for control of the New York Times from sources within the United States of America. It's not like they want these lines of control exposed to public view.
Yeah, okay, I see what you mean. Right. And then, Mike, also, Peter King from New York, who I don't really care for, he's been coming out in the last few days defending Trump. I'm just curious, do these congressmen, the individual congressmen, are they aware of how their districts voted? Like, for example, like in the recent presidential election. I'm sure
are
they aware of how many...
I'm sure that they are here, but in the case of Representative King, he's part of the House Intelligence Committee, and the CIA just snubbed them, which they're not supposed to do.
Yes.
They were asked to come in to a hearing to present the evidence they claim to have that Russia was hacking our election systems, and they simply refused. They're not going through the normal channels. They're not going through Congress. They're simply sending out agents to leak this story to media assets. And that's why Representative King felt he had to speak up, because it clearly is a political hatchet job, not real-world intelligence.
Yeah, I was just wondering if the congressmen, those congressmen in the incoming Congress and the Trump administration, if their support for Trump will depend on how their own districts voted, like how heavy of a majority Trump gained in their districts, and that will basically cause them.
No, I hear what you're saying
Trump
here. Basically, I think everybody who's in Congress is going to be making a decision how much they'll support or oppose Donald Trump based on whether they think Donald Trump is going to do a really good job, in which case riding on his coattails is a strong path to re-election, or if they think that somehow Trump is going to be thwarted in his efforts to bring about any significant change, in which case supporting Trump is going to be a negative in the coming election. I think that's probably what's dominating their thinking over and above how their districts voted in the last election.
Right. Yeah, I would just urge all the listeners to I try to make a habit of, I call my congressman a lot here. I mean, if it makes a difference, it makes a difference. But I want them to hear my voice. Mm-hmm. Whether it's Congressman Hecht, he actually lost, or the incoming senator, then our other senator, I can't recall his name, the Republican. But I make a habit of calling these people, and I let if it's an issue that I really feel strongly about, I let them know. So I think I urge all the listeners to do the same. I
agree. I absolutely agree. We have to get more involved in our government. Voting is not enough. And like I said before, anybody who thinks that now that the election is over and the Electoral College has certified Trump as the president, that we can sit on our butts and just wait for the world to get better, it's not going to happen. Donald Trump is not going to be able to fix anything all by himself. We're going to have to bring about that change. What Donald Trump represents is an open door and a cooperative White House to some of these changes that we need to make. And so we're going to have to get more involved. Our work isn't over with Hillary's defeat, our work is just beginning.
And the electoral reform, really, that has to be the number one issue. I'm going to start making calls on behalf of that much-needed reform come January.
That certainly is going to be my top priority for at least the next 2 years. And I'm going to make that article on how to have honest elections a permanent fixture at the top of the website. I may even start a second website just on this whole issue of how we can have honest elections. And if you can grab all this information and just send it all around, it's a good framework to start with. And, of course, I welcome any suggestions for improvement. As long as you understand the basic rules, there will be voter ID, there will not be electronic voting machines, there will not be tabulation centers, because that's where all the election fraud is taking place. I mean, up in Michigan, they're finding 37% more votes than voters in these districts that went for Hillary Clinton. You're not seeing that on the corporate media. They're not reporting it one tiny, tiny bit. You're having to come to the independent media to find out that there was, in fact, massive evidence of election fraud, both in the primaries and in the general election, all of it favoring Hillary Clinton. All you're getting from the corporate media is Russia's bad, we're good, Russia's bad, we're good. That's all you need to know.
And they're too busy demonizing the dead Russian ambassador. That's how evil these people are.
Yeah, that is tacky in the extreme.
Deep into such a low. I think it was the Daily News that basically compared him to a Nazi, and they said it's about time, basically. It's about time one of these Russian officials was killed. That's how despicable these people are.
Yeah, that was Gersh Kunzman who did that. Yeah, we talked about that just a few minutes ago. It is disgraceful. It is absolutely disgraceful. Okay.
And the usual suspects, of course, Al Jazeera as well. Thank you so much, Mike.
All right, got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing good.
You. Yeah. I got a question. Do you really think that CIA or somebody was behind the assassination of this Russian ambassador and plus this other Russian official who was killed today? I think yesterday.
Well, we cannot rule it out. We cannot rule that out at all. We cannot rule out that cutouts have been used to try and obscure the trail. I think the real question is, why was this done at this particular time? And certainly with Turkey pivoting toward Russia, and Russia, Turkey, and Iran cooperating on resolving the war in Syria without allowing the U.S. to have a say in it, I think that may have very well been the agenda, to poison the relationship between Turkey and Russia, and to prevent the meeting from happening, but it didn't work.
Well, I'm wondering whether I know these people are insane, but I didn't think they're that insane. Even during the Cold War, we didn't knock off each other's, the United States and Soviet Union didn't knock off each other's,
No, unfortunately, that's a harbinger of a hot war.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is Vladimir Putin, they keep on reminding that he used to be in the KGB. And it's true. KGB
yeah,
is one of the most...
George Herbert Walker Bush was head of the CIA.
Exactly.
Okay, Bill Clinton, if he was not in CIA, he was certainly a partner with him in Operation Screwworm, all the gun and drug running out of Arkansas in the 1980s. I think you can't rise above a certain level in our society without the CIA knocking on the door and saying, you might be of use to us.
No, but what I'm trying to say is that with Putin, if they think that he's just going to sit around and not find out who's behind it, and if it is the U.S. behind it, if the CIA or somebody like that is behind it, he's perfectly capable and probably would, when we start losing some of our ambassadors, or maybe even higher officials.
No, he won't do that.
Be surprised.
No, Putin won't do that.
I don't think so?
No. It's one thing to know that something happened, and what you do with it is a complex issue. When Bletchley Park broke the Enigma code and started reading what the Nazis were going to be doing and where, they had to make these very difficult choices about whether they were going to try and intervene or not, because to intervene too much would have tipped off the Nazis that Enigma had been broken. And so they had to sit back and let ships sail into areas where they were going to be sunk, let people march into areas where they were going to be killed. I think Putin probably does know who did this, and I think he's going to sit still. The one thing Putin is not going to do is escalate the situation with assassinations of U.S. ambassadors, because Putin doesn't want this war. And Putin understands all he's got to do is stay cool for another month, and the threat of a hot war between the U.S. and Russia is gone. So I don't expect to see Putin do anything at all about what happened with the assassination. The fact that the meeting with Turkey and Iran went forward, I think, was sending a message that, no, this is not going to be changing anything here. Anyway, Mark, got to let you go. Got to do a station identification break, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're talking about the economy. We were talking yesterday about Russia's rise as a business-friendly environment in the World Bank's recent report here. Now we're finding out India just overtook Britain as the world's 6th largest economy. So we're definitely seeing the center of economic power shifting toward the east. And the reason is very simple. Certainly here in the United States of America, we don't actually make anything anymore, and nobody wants our agriculture. We have a culture that on Wall Street that believes that if you just shake the money back and forth with enough vigor, it'll magically grow all by itself. And as long as they have the printing presses, they can make that happen. The reality for people here on the ground, though, is very, very different. The number of millennials still living at home has reached a 75-year high. It is closing in on the number of people being forced to live with their parents that was set in 1940 at the end of the Great Depression. That's how bad things are out here. Along with the retail Mageddon, it's a horrible Christmas shopping season. People don't have money to buy stuff here. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a phone call. Donna in New Mexico, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, and I'm going to say this. I think I can say it correctly. Mela Kilikimaka.
You got it. That's it.
I'm going to tell you how I know that. Because I actually have an old CD with Bing Crosby singing that song.
Yes, it's a classic. It's been all over the radio here, especially at local station KSSK. They've just gone totally overboard on the Christmas music.
Anyway, I wanted to follow up with what some of the other callers have been talking about with regard to participating in politics now more than ever. And I've been doing it through social media on Donald Trump's Facebook. And even though he's not in there yet, and we got to give him time, I have some issues. Many of us have issues. And what I'm trying to do, I actually posted a link to a documentary on fracking, just to put it out there, hoping that he does actually pay attention to his social media, which he seems to do. And I also took issue with his appointment of the U.S. ambassador to Israel, which I have a real hard time with. And
a lot of people were very, very concerned about that one. A lot of people were concerned about that one. I'm not happy with that either. But as Harry Truman used to say, that Oval Office is the hottest kitchen in the world, and it doesn't matter what you do, there's going to be some SOB who doesn't like it. Again, I want to wait to see the end of the first 100 days, but I still maintain, and call this an article of faith if you will, that Donald Trump at his absolute worst is still better than Hillary Clinton at her best.
Absolutely. There's no question about that.
Yes.
But I do think because of the social media aspect of how he approaches things is a very good opportunity for people to say, hey, happy about this, not happy about that. He does seem to pay attention. I just want to put that out to the people who, I voted for him. First time in my life I voted for a Republican. First time. Mm-hmm. And I'm standing by it because they're to me, at the very least, he's shaking up the establishment, and that's an important thing. So hopefully if enough people participate, and we have to, on the local level, on every level, to continue to do that, then, our voices may still be heard and be considered important. That's all I wanted to say. That's it.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, Donna, certainly communicating with Trump is going to be important, or whoever's actually reading his social media for him. I'm sure that he personally is not sitting there scanning the stuff anymore. But I think it's actually more important to be communicating with members of the Congress and various government officials who are going to be opposing Donald Trump. They don't want any changes made to a system from which they personally benefit and enrich themselves. And so I think it's more important to be directing our concerns and our ire at them. Like I said,
I quite agree.
Yeah.
I quite agree with that. And it worries me that they're already lining things up against him.
Mm-hmm.
And you think they would have learned. There's such an overwhelming message here that we are tired of business as usual, and it's time for change. And absolutely what you said, I completely agree with. Thank you very much. Talk to you soon.
Thank you very much, Donna. We're going to let you go here. I mean, here is the dire reality that the current establishment, especially the liberals and the corporate media, are dealing with. They have to find some way to turn the clock back to the 1950s or 1960s, or they are gone. That's their mindset. There is no other alternative there. They have to somehow drag us back to a world where we believe in the corporate media or have no choice but to believe in the corporate media and do as we're told, or they're going to be gone. The whole thing is going to start tearing itself apart. And I'm holding out a hope that under President Trump, we can peacefully reverse the course of this nation and start that long, slow trek back to being a constitutional republic with an honest and fairly democratically elected government. And it's going to take a while to do that. But there is still the risk of a Soviet Union-style collapse out there, and it's very real, and it could happen. And a lot of that is tied in to the intractability of the establishment to adjust and adapt to the new reality of a very skeptical population, and the fact that the American people and people around the world are now on to the little games that they've been playing with us for decade after decade after decade. We're going to do a quick shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just rejoining the network here, and we're talking about the economic news. Now, Royal Bank of Scotland and Barclays are among 7 banks that have been hit with fines totaling 99 million Swiss francs for interest rate rigging. And we're going to keep on hitting these stories over and over and over again because the picture that is emerging is that these ultra-wealthy financial institutions are getting wealthy through criminal activity. Remember that old TV commercial for one of the investment houses? We make money the old-fashioned way. We earn it. Well, looks like the old-fashioned way was basically cheating. Now, former BlackRock portfolio manager Mark Littleton has been given a year in prison for insider trading. And you begin to understand that there is a serious problem there in our economic system. Frankly, I think the United States ought to be doing what other countries are doing. Iceland throws their crooked bankers in jail. China and Iran execute them. I think you do a few of those, and these Wall Street people are going to snap too. The reason the fraud continues apace is nothing bad ever happens. Their corporations are fined, and the fines are deducted from taxes, and the balance paid for by customers in higher fees. There's no incentive for them to comply with the banking laws. There's no incentive for the banking industry to be honest and ethical and fair. Quite the opposite. The incentive is go on out, be reckless. If you get into trouble, we'll loot the people and make them pay for the losses. And that is the essence of a fascist economic dictatorship. Now, despite my concerns about possible ramifications resulting from Christine Lagarde's conviction for criminal fraud, and she's not going to appeal. She's accepting the decision. The punishment was a wrist slap. And as it turns out, she gets to keep her job at the IMF. They don't care that she's a criminal. Apparently, the IMF is the bank of crime because the last 3 heads of the IMF have all had criminal problems. Now, this is the season for credit card debt. Story coming out of Investment Watch blog. This Christmas, Americans will spend an average of $422 per child. Actually, I don't think so. I think $422 per child is what the retailers want you to spend. And so they're going to put this out there so that if you're there with only maybe $100 for your child, there's that social pressure, keeping up with the Joneses. Oh, we haven't spent enough. We haven't spent enough. It's just another way of wringing more money out of you. It's an act of desperation, and it's definitely not working. Britain's debt soars to £1.7 trillion. Borrowing is jumping again. It's a debt trap. It's designed that way. The entire banking system, from the private central banks on down, is a system of enslavement. Its goal is to get you onto that debt trap as early as possible. They're doing it now with student loans. Next thing you know, they're going to be giving credit cards to high schoolers to make you their debt slaves. This must stop. All right, we're going to take a couple of phone calls. Joel in Wisconsin, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hookah paka hookah, Michael.
Okay.
Close enough, eh?
Close enough for country and western.
If our government media complex is now telling the American people that there is such a thing as fake news, which there never was before, and that Russia, Putin is behind it, then they're admitting something that they could never say before. And if Putin did not do it by himself, then wasn't there a conspiracy behind that? And then there would be conspiracies, which we all know there's no such thing as conspiracies either.
Well, like I said, the biggest failing when they decided they were going to start propagandizing the American people, because the United States didn't really have, at that time, a permanent ministry of propaganda, they subcontracted all of this out to advertising agencies and public relations firms, which institutionally do not think in long time spans. 30-second commercial, 60-second commercial, 4 to 5 week sales campaign, and then the slate is erased and they're off to the next thing. So there's no continuity. And that's why the propaganda we're hearing today directly contrasts with the propaganda we were hearing 6 months ago. Now they're out there, Russia's hacking our elections. It's all a complete fraud. Everybody's rigging. 6 months ago when Donald Trump said there's a reason to doubt the honesty and accuracy of our elections, and they said, oh, that's ridiculous. Nobody can interfere with the American elections. And when the American people hear this switch around, they're throwing their hands up and saying, this is utter nonsense. It's double talk. And the corporate media and the government, of course, they're out there wondering why we remember things that we were told 2 and 3 months ago. We're supposed to just forget about it. It's supposed to just magically disappear from our memory cells so that we're only listening to what they're saying today and believing what they say today. Humans don't work like that, of course. And that's why the propaganda is so self-destructive and self-contradictory, and that's why ultimately it is failing right now.
And if our intelligence agencies now know that this was going on, they just figured out they could tell us in detail what's going on, and they want to do something about it, why didn't they stop it when they, where were they 6 months ago?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. If they knew Russia was interfering with our elections, why didn't they do something about it? And, where's the NSA? Well, the only word we're getting from the NSA is from former NSA workers who are out there saying, no, if Russia was hacking the elections, the NSA would know it. And, right. Again, they're in a state of panic and desperation. They can feel they are losing their grip on the American people. They're losing control. And they're absolutely in a panic, and that's the reason for all this screaming about fake news and all this screaming about Russia hacked the election, and they're just trying to find anything that will get traction with the American people where they can roll back the clock to where we were all naive and obedient.
Yes, and it's about time the people are waking up, and that's all I got. All
right, well, thank you very much, Joel. We're going to switch over to Matt in Colorado. Aloha, Matt. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I haven't talked to you in a little while. Thanks for taking my call. Wanted to hit on a couple of points. Of course, the first one is being the rhetoric of fake news. That's completely absurd. And you know what is really troubling to me is that it seems that the neoliberal, neocon conservatives are making a play prior to the inauguration of Trump in order to facilitate a war against Russia.
Yes.
And they're already putting troops in Estonia and the whole thing is tied into the IMF and so forth, or excuse me, the European Union and the European Central Bank. And what I don't understand about this is because, you and I we're people, we only have the ability to share information or do whatever we can do, but they are actively instigating provocation with a superpower, which would result in mutually assured destruction because it would go nuclear. And I don't understand what their objective is, given the fact that they can print money at will and the greed. And I know you are fond of using the term money junkie. So it just seems like they're, and I don't use this term lightly, but Satanists that want to create World War III. And I don't know where the good men and women in the United States military are just going to stand down and say, hey, guys, we're not doing this. And, I'm not a big Trump supporter, but make America great again, make the world great again. How do we actually...
Well, I think basically we make the world great again by pulling back from all this military nonsense, which just sucks up so much of the gross domestic product and all these young lives and causes so much destruction that has to be rebuilt, and we focus on building new and building for the future. The situation with the war is the people who are pushing for the war are victims of their own groupthink and confirmation bias. They're absolutely convinced that we can win a nuclear war. They're refusing to look at all these horrible reports coming out about America's latest weapons, like the Zumwalt, which is now being blasted as wasteful and incapable. They don't want to hear that stuff. They think they've got a good bead. We've got all these wonderful weapons. We're going to prevail. And there's a lesson of history that needs to be remembered here. Whenever two nations go to war, both sides are convinced they're going to win, and obviously half of them are wrong.
I would completely agree with you, and to me it just seems that they're maniacs because through cooperation we could all come out better than going into war. And the globe is getting smaller by the day, and more information is being shared. And it seems like cooperation would be such a much more logical.
Well, for ordinary people like us, yeah, cooperation is always going to be advantageous. But you need to understand, from the point of view of rulers and the money junkies, war is easy. It doesn't take a lot of skill to go on out and destroy other things and then try and profit from the chaos. Actually running a country profitably and efficiently takes a lot of work. And these hereditary ruling class members of our society don't have the necessary skill set. They've gotten by with war and lies and propaganda so long, they don't know any other way to do what they're doing. There's this supposed bit of wisdom that war is always good for business. No, it isn't. War is very terrible for business, except for the defense contractors. What war does is it plunges us all back into the debt of the bankers. The bankers are the ones who really want wars, because wars represent that richest harvest of debt to the bankers, because the bankers will loan money to both sides to fight the war. Then when the war is over, they'll loan more money to both sides to rebuild from the war. And when it's all over, ordinary people like you and I, we've sort of kind of got what we had before, except the graveyards are a lot bigger, and we're back in debt slavery to those bankers for the next 100 years. That's the scam. That's why the bankers are always pushing to have war. They're not going to fight in them. Their children aren't going to fight and die in them. They're living in their mansions in places that are outside the invasion routes and bombing targets. So it's very easy for them to sit back and say, yeah, let's play the grand game here. After all, military people are just dumb, stupid pawns to be spent in foreign policy, to paraphrase from Henry Kissinger. Anyway, listen, Matt, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to take a phone call from Philip in Poland. Aloha, Philip. What's the latest update from Poland?
Hello, Michael. How are you?
I'm fine.
I was listening to your show yesterday when you were discussing Poland and concerned that there was some sort of colour revolution going on out here. It's not.
Okay.
Poland is a fairly insular country in itself. Has been for centuries. But the current ruling party are, I think the technical term is bunch of nutters. The Kraczynski twins, who have run it for many years, one died in the plane crash in Smolensk, are just out there. The rules they're bringing in, it's a one-way path to a dictatorship. However, the people that are protesting them, there's irony upon irony in that. They're talking about independence and freedom and partisanship, yet they're waving European, EU flags all over the place, which sort of undermines their whole argument.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't be too concerned that there's a colour revolution going on out here.
Well, that's good to hear because, I mean, we've had way too much of this U.S. mucking about with other people's countries here, I think, for one lifetime.
There's no doubt that George Soros did pile a load of money in here a few years ago. But the country, when communism fell, the people that ran the industry here in this country were the mafia, and they didn't let go. So the leading elite here are mafia-based operations,
mm-hmm.
and that has not changed. And when they did try to change it 20 years ago, people protested. The government said, no, we're going to sweep it under the carpet. So nothing did change.
Sounds a lot like what's been happening over here.
Yeah, I wouldn't deny that. I just wanted to make that point that it's unlikely that there's no feeling for a revolution. There's a lot of dissatisfaction
mm-hmm.
with the ruling PIS party, PIS. But there's, I think you've got to go back to 1957, the last time the Polish people really stood up in arms behind the barricades, and they were crushed. And add on top of that communism, for all that period, and the secret police,
mm-hmm.
where you didn't know who was really speaking to whom.
Well, we're coming up on a commercial break, so let me just make a comment here. The reality is that when the U.S. goes on out to try and do a regime change, they're not always successful. In fact, they're only successful half the time. And very often they can overestimate the reality on the ground in a country. They certainly did that in Iran in 2009 when they tried to have a color revolution there to drive Ahmadinejad out. So the fact that Soros is in there mucking about in Poland's internal affairs, I think there's a concern. But I'm glad to know that it looks like any such efforts are going to come to naught. Because
please hold me over, because there's one point I want to come back to you on.
All right. Well, we still got about another minute and a half, so keep on talking, and then we'll take the commercial break.
Okay. There is no advantage for the Americans to try and overthrow the current regime. They've got everything they want out of them. They've got the missile defense system in place. They've got American troops on the ground, and the Polish ruling party are beholden to the Americans in a lot of respects already. So there's no real benefit in flipping to the other party. So I wish there was some sort of uprising in Europe that is more of the Trumpism type, freedom, liberty. It's to my mind, it's just not there.
I think over time we're going to start seeing that, because this push to create a single global government has created a political climate conducive to a single global revolution where the people of every single country all at the same time stand up and kick out the bosses and the oligarchs and the money junkies, drop them in the ocean, drop them in a volcano, and we basically go back to a much more humane society for ourselves. Anyway, thanks an awful lot for the update.
I hear you. Have a good night and a lovely Christmas.
All right, same to you, and we'll be back with more phone calls. And Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the telephones here. Steve in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Add to what you spoke about the war, the bankers funding both sides and then the rebuilding after that. I think another thing I find very infuriating is after the war is over, the establishment and building of memorials to honor the soldiers, and the spin they put on that is that they were defending freedoms of the United States, democracy, when these were just wars of conquest. That irritates me greatly.
Yeah, it does me too. They're just trying to set in steel and stone the official mythology that all of America's wars are moral and just and righteous, and all the other countries' wars are evil and bad, and they deserve to lose.
Yeah, and then that after phrase, support your soldiers, support the soldiers. Well, I support protecting my borders. I support my country being protected, but I don't support it to invade other countries and overthrow governments and to establish puppet governments and steal the resources. I don't support any of that, and that's kind of what we are.
Well, I'm glad you made that distinction here because my point of view, and this gets into this idea of the government has all this money to build all these war memorials, but no money to actually take care of the wounded veterans when they come on home, which tells you what their priorities are. And my feeling is that whether you agree with the wars or not, and I certainly do not, just in case some of you were uncertain where I stand on those, we do have a debt of honor to all those people who put on that uniform and who came back wounded and injured. They should be taken care of. That's what the VA is supposed to do. They haven't been doing a very good job of it. So I think it's possible to support our troops while not supporting the war, as long as you look at it from that point of view. Because I have the utmost respect for anybody who does put on that uniform and takes that oath to serve our nation. The fact that they are being misused and abused and taken advantage of by the civilian leadership is, of course, atrocious and abominable. But we have all military people around here in Hawaii. We have the highest per capita density of military of any state in the United States. And all the military people I talk to, they're very upright, honorable people. They're strict constitutionalists. And I'm in agreement with a lot of people who think that if push comes to shove and there was some kind of a confrontation here in the United States, the rank-and-file military would not be supporting the U.S. government.
Point well. Thank you, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Ken in Australia there. Good day, mate. What's going on?
Hello, mate. How are you?
Fair dinkum.
Yeah, I'm a friend of Caribbean John.
Okay.
And I just want to let you know that the guy's in a coma. So for everyone who's a fan of his or will claim to be Christian, I would say pray for him. And he's basically had a very bad cough, lung, and I think it's something else. But his wife called me and let me know. And I'm a little vague on it because I was a little stunned, I suppose. But I'm not clear whether he was induced into a coma. But the next 24 hours will be critical. So I'd ask Claire and anyone who claims to be a Christian to pray for him. He's an atheist, and he basically, I pray that he would, have a vision of the reality of Jesus and hell and all the rest, and that his eternal soul would be saved. Second priority would be that he gets raised up from his sick bed to entertain us another day. So I just thought I'd inform you guys about that, and I know he's got a lot of fans.
I appreciate that, and please do keep me informed as to what's going on. And I'm sensitive to this issue because a few years back, I had a serious sudden illness. I didn't go into a coma, at least that I remember, but it was a very narrow miss back then, and so hopefully he's going to be okay. But if you get any information, if you don't feel like calling into the show, just drop me an email because I would like to know what's going on with him.
Sure, I wanted people to know because I know he's got a lot of fans in America, particularly in Texas, and just thought I'd let people know. And yes, I'm on Scene Life, and I'm friends with you on Scene Life.
Okay.
So if anyone else wants to contact me that way via you, maybe that's the appropriate platform. If anyone else wants to contact me, I'll notify you on Scene Life. And if anyone wants to talk to me, you can refer them to me.
Well, okay, I will definitely plug them in over at Scene Life. And again, thank you for letting us know, because it actually crossed my mind that he hadn't called in today, and I was starting to wonder what was going on. So thank you for the update and for keeping us informed. And I'm in agreement with you. Even though I'm not religious, I certainly hope that he will recover and continue to regale us with his tales into the future.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm a first-time caller. I've been listening to you for years, as has my dad. And but we're in another time zone, and we often find it more convenient to get the Ron Gibson podcast. But we love everything you do, and I'm sure you're sick of hearing that. But
no,
that's
I'm not.
really all I've got to say today.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I'll ring in with updates when I can.
All right, I do appreciate that.
You know.
I do appreciate that greatly, and thanks an awful lot for sharing that information. And say hello to your father for me.
Not a problem. Thank you.
All right, talk to you soon.
Bye for now.
All right, bye-bye. All right, well, that's definitely going to put a crimp on the festivities today. And I'm sure we're all in agreement here that we hope John pulls through this, comes back to us. There's a wonderful line in the movie Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and I find myself actually using it. We've reached an age where life stops giving us things and starts to take them away. And that is definitely the downside of getting older. All right, let's turn over to the issue of immigration. This is getting really ugly. Apparently, in the Italian city of Trieste, an 18-year-old girl was attacked by a group of migrants. This sparked a protest of hundreds of Italians taking to the street and getting into a confrontation with the migrants. Rocks are being thrown. So how's this New World Order, everybody love each other in Europe thing coming along there, Mr. Soros here? Apparently, up in Germany, there was an asylum seeker who was informed by a German official that his asylum request had been turned down, pulled out a knife, tried to steal the official. And then apparently also a member of security who tried to intervene as well. So this is all working out so wonderfully well. Let's see, we're going to take a phone call from John in Rancho Cucamonga. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, good to talk to you. I just wanted to take just a little exception to your position. I think you've got both feet planted firmly on both sides of the fence. The troops, the mission of the troops is inextricably and inseparably linked to their existence. If there is no mission, as determined by the current criminal-in-chief or the past criminal-in-chief, then there's no troops. So now, don't get me wrong, I'm not in favor of anyone getting hurt, but I'm not naive enough to believe that when the young people put on a uniform and go and attack another country that's no threat to us, that someone's not going to start shooting back at them. So it's going to happen. Now, as far as the VA hospitals, I agree with you. That's part of a handshake, a deal, a contract, and they should be better taken care of. But at some point, I have to say that the message that we should be sending young people, and that the pastors in the churches should be sending to young people, is that if they cannot morally justify what they're doing overseas by invading another country, just to install central banking, all in the pursuit of the one world government by the Rothschild central bankers, why would anyone risk their life to do that? And
well,
that's
they
what they ought to be thinking about.
They wouldn't, but you need to understand that those military recruiters, when they approach the young people, they don't go up to them and say, "Hey, we need you to help us invade another country and steal all their wealth." They come on out and say, you're protecting America, and they fill their heads full of all of this noble ideals. And by the time these young people realize what suckers they've been played for, they're basically stuck in this situation and can't get out. And that's what I mean about how these military people have been used and abused and betrayed by that civilian leadership. They've been lured into the military with promises which the government is under no obligation to keep, and they've been lured in with a clearly fraudulent description of what their purpose is going to be.
Well, I agree with you up to a point, Michael. You're right. I wasn't talking about the military recruiters. I'm talking more about the kids, young people's parents, their aunts and uncles, the religious people. I have think some of them go to church every now and then. You got to allow for that, even if you don't. So that's not really a big deal. I mean, there's a lot of pastors that just don't speak out against this. Their answer is they're going to pray for the troops. Well, pray for them to do what? Pray for them to get a clue?
Well, you've got a valid point there, and unfortunately the silence of the clergy on the evils of wars goes back to George Bush's faith-based initiatives where churches were literally given money to be on the side of the government's agenda to support it, and many churches that have spoken out against the war are being contacted by the IRS and told that they can lose their tax-exempt status if they advocate against the war, because the war is a political issue, and under the rules of a 501c3, they're not allowed to advocate a political issue. And so they're playing loosey-goosey with the definitions. But you know,
you're absolutely right.
You know,
you're right. I heard about that too.
Yeah.
That's part of the whole equation. But I just want to thank you for allowing me to get on your show and state my case. So,
all right.
Anyway.
Well, Merry Christmas.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Have a good day.
Merry Christmas to you too, Michael.
All right. Bye-bye. All right. Now then, getting on back to immigration. Apparently, there was a Austrian town of Oberndorf, and they were having a nativity play done by children. It's a very common thing this time of the year. And apparently an asylum seeker stormed the stage, a Somali, and started reading from the Koran, and obviously caused a great deal of upset. Now remember what I said before. This process of migration is a filtering system. You're not getting the best of the people from those origin countries, because in those origin countries, those who are doing well, who have good lives, good jobs, good businesses, they're not going to leave. What George Soros' refugee migration program is luring to Europe are the people who couldn't make it in their own countries. Many of them are criminals. And they're getting into Europe. They were lured with promises of all kind of free stuff they're not getting, and they're starting to act on out. Which gets us over to this incident in Berlin with the truck that ran into that Christmas fair. The original suspect they had was released. Now they've identified a new suspect, a Tunisian, and yes, he is a refugee. And everybody is very upset about this. This could easily turn into the spark that causes the German people to rise up against the refugees and even their own government, because people are very, very angry. Now, what's really interesting, this Tunisian individual, apparently German officials already turned down his request for asylum. And he was scheduled to be deported. They tried to send him back to Tunisia earlier. Tunisia wouldn't accept him. Tunisia said, we don't want this guy. He's nothing but trouble. So this push for a new world order, blend all the people together, has failed miserably, because it was all predicated on this church of liberalology fantasy that you can control what's inside a person's head by controlling the environment around them. And it never works, and that's why the liberal agenda makes so many horrific mistakes. This is one of them. The German member of the European Parliament has stood up and said, these are Angela Merkel's deaths. She is responsible. Geert Wilders actually tweeted a picture of Angela Merkel. It was photoshopped to have blood on her hands and face. And he's out there saying, they hate us and kill us and nobody protects us. And right-wing leaders across Europe are denouncing Angela Merkel for having done this to her own people. There is no way she's going to win re-election next year. She was a fool to even throw her hat in the rings. The German government has now admitted just 2.8% of the 1.2 million refugees have managed to find jobs. And it points out something that is a stark reality that George Soros simply ignored. The economy of Europe, the infrastructure of Europe, the social services of Europe did not have the capacity to absorb this huge surge of new people coming on in. And it's causing all kinds of damage. Now, as I said yesterday, we've got a very tumultuous month before Donald Trump takes office, and apparently those people who are in favor of, illegal immigrants and refugees, they're throwing the doors open, and illegal immigrants are flooding the U.S.-Mexico border. And more than 15,000 were stopped in November. And they don't know how many are getting through. They're just pouring on in. And they're always saying the same thing. Obama said it was okay for us to come here. Well, it was up until Hillary lost the election. Now they don't need you. Maybe they're going to load it up for 2020. Now, to show you how out of control this is getting, one of the problems, the refugee situation in Europe, is how it is very obvious that the governments are on the side of the refugees and not their own indigenous people. And that encourages the violence and the religious hysteria. Apparently, there's a town in Belgium that has canceled having a nativity scene over fears it will offend the town's Muslims. They have 4 Muslims living in this town, which was justification for tearing down the nativity scene. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And I'm getting a ton of email with well wishes for John in Barbados, and I will save them all up and forward them to him when we get the good news that he is back with us and able to share life with us again here. All right, let's take a quick phone call. Glenn in Philadelphia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I think the German people need to seek asylum for Angela Merkel. An involuntary commitment should do, because she's bat-foo crazy.
Well, I think probably most of the world leaders today are candidates for a straitjacket, with the exception of Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I thought of you the other day when I heard about that truck attack on the Christmas market, because I remember many times you said how you enjoyed Christmas in Germany because the people weren't so obsessed with the materialism, and what a wonderful atmosphere it was and feeling, and people just can be nice and everything. And I saw a woman interviewed on TV, a German woman interviewed, and she talked about how, this is kind of throwing a wet blanket on that and making people anxious and fearful, understandably, justifiably so.
Well, they're ramping up. The Berlin market has now been canceled. They've got more police presence at Christmas fairs all across Europe. And again, for anybody who is wanting to start World War III before Donald Trump can take office, we have 2 targets of opportunity for highly symbolic false flags. We've got Christmas followed by New Year, and we have to be vigilant.
Yeah, exactly. And as you said, resist the provocations, and much the way Russia and Iran have been doing. The question is whether or not they're going to try and they even have Ukraine as an option to try and start trouble over there, which apparently,
apparently Poroshenko is uncorking on those breakaway republics right now. But again, I think Putin is just going to sit there and say, I feel bad about those Eastern Ukrainian republics, but I'm not going to bite into this war here. I've only got 1 more month where I have to stay cool, and then all this trouble is going to go away.
Right. Hopefully, God willing. And I was concerned they would try and rope the Russians into a 2-front situation by provoking in Ukraine and Syria simultaneously. But it sounds like that the Syrian army and the Russians have the upper hand on the terrorists in Syria at the moment, so that's good.
The U.S. doesn't. The U.S. has absolutely no political door open to it to go into Syria, short of simply arbitrarily declaring war on Syria and saying, "Well, we're going to have a war, and we know it's morally wrong, and but we're going to have it. You're going to pay for it. Your children are going to die in it, and that's just the way it's going to be." But that obviously prompts the possibility of a massive public uprising in this country. We have a government that constantly goes around deciding for us who our enemies are supposed to be, and we're all big people. We can decide for ourselves who our real enemies are, and stop letting the government say, you must hate this person, and you must love this person. You will love Israel. You will hate Russia. Anyway, listen, got to let you go, Glenn. Got to take a break. Merry Christmas. Station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I want to finish up talking about this story coming out of Belgium, where the town leadership canceled the display of a nativity scene over concerns it might offend the town's count them, 4 Muslims. And obviously the local citizenry are very upset, and they should be. Now, angry refugees aside, every Muslim I've met is very respectful of other people's religion. And I certainly don't have a problem with the nativity scenes, other than that those are the people we're bombing to steal their oil. That's always an uncomfortable feeling. I don't have a problem with Hanukkah decorations or anything else. That's part of being a mature human being, is you respect, your own traditions and beliefs, and you have tolerance and acceptance for the others. And this running around screaming, your religious symbols offend me, that's a path to a tremendous unhappiness. And I think that's very, very silly. Apparently, there's a growing problem here in the United States of America where legal U.S. American citizens living in the sanctuary cities are becoming very angry because they're having to abide by local laws that the illegals are allowed to skate on. The illegals are getting better treatment from the U.S. and state governments and local governments in those sanctuary cities than the legal American citizens are. I mean, that really is absurd. All right, let's take a phone call here. Brian in Phoenix, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. I sure enjoyed your analysis on the economy yesterday and about the central banks and the influence that they try to pull on us. It's always been a mystery to me, changing gears here, how we got into Vietnam. Was that a central bank issue? Could you go into that and give me your understanding of how we got involved in that nonsense?
Well, Vietnam was a situation, it was a very complex situation. If you go back and you look at Oliver Stone's movie, JFK, where Garrison is meeting the mysterious Mr. X, who pretty much everybody has already figured out was L. Fletcher Prouty, and basically saying that the defense contractors in the United States were very frustrated because the second invasion of Cuba had been called off, and they weren't making any money. And so President Johnson basically said, all right, I'm going to let you guys go play over in Southeast Asia. Just keep your hands off of Cuba because that'll trigger a war. But as is the case in all the wars, the goal was to grind up weapons and munition and charge the American people for it. And Vietnam was basically pacing in circles, accomplishing nothing for most of it. Again, going back to a movie, Flight of the Intruder, which is based on the book of the same name, where the flight crews are frustrated because night after night they go on out to bomb a suspected truck park and all they hit is an empty field. And there never were any trucks there. The goal was to fly the jets, drop the bombs, and then say, oh, we need more, and charge the American taxpayers for it and feed the money to the defense contractors. And yes, the bankers are making money off of that as well because the lines of credit for all of this are going through them.
Were there natural assets there that they wanted to seize?
Not really. Not really. The excuse was, we're defending the world against the encroaching communist threat, which is kind of what they're trying to wag at us right now to get us to go along with the wars. But it was really basically it was all about splitting up the group that had been behind the John F. Kennedy assassination. Now, I was not a big fan of Lyndon Johnson, but I do have to acknowledge he was handed a very dicey situation. He knew that the CIA wanted a new invasion of Cuba. He knew that the military-industrial complex wanted a war to make money off of. And Johnson also knew what the secret deal between Kennedy and Khrushchev had been arising from the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was a new invasion of Cuba would automatically trigger a nuclear response from the Soviet Union. And so basically Lyndon Johnson buried all of the manufactured evidence that was linking Lee Harvey Oswald to Cuba, rebranded him as the crazed lone nut assassin. They gave the military-industrial complex Vietnam to play around in, and basically yanked the legs out of the CIA's attempt at a second Cuban invasion. Do you remember that rifle they planted on Oswald, the Mannlicher Carcano? The world's worst shoulder weapon ever made. It's a piece of junk. That's why it was available for sale, for $12 in the United States. Why they put that rifle on him? The reason was, following the Bay of Pigs, Castro was arming his people, ordinary citizens. He wanted a rifle in every single Cuban person's home, and the rifle he chose to import from Italy was the Mannlicher Carcano. And that was the reason they planted that gun on Lee Oswald. That was supposed to be part of the case to say that Castro had been behind the assassination of John F. Kennedy to try and enrage the American people into supporting a second invasion. And Johnson had to find a way to pull the plug on that one.
Interesting. Do you think, do you agree with Roger Stone and his assessment of LBJ being the mastermind behind the Kennedy assassination?
No, he wasn't. And basically, I think Johnson was dealing with the fact that Kennedy was going to dump him for the second term. And Johnson had found that out because one of his staffers shared an apartment with Mary Jo Kopechne, who was a Kennedy party girl, and you know what I mean when I say that. And it was through Mary Jo Kopechne that Johnson found out Kennedy was planning to dump him in the second term, and that would, of course, been the end of Johnson's dreams of the White House. So Johnson was certainly of a mindset to go along with the plot. But remember, throughout history, there's never just one cause for a war or one cause for an assassination. What you get is a large number of groups, people, entities, whatever, whose own agendas overlap at the same solution, and that's when these events will happen. In the case of John F. Kennedy, the CIA hated him for the firing of Allen Dulles and the threat to destroy the CIA itself. The Federal Reserve hated Kennedy for Executive Order 11110, which they felt was taking money out of their pocket by issuing an interest-free currency for the American people to use. The organized crime had felt betrayed by John F. Kennedy because they helped him steal the election from Richard Nixon, and then Kennedy sics his brother Robert Kennedy as Attorney General on organized crime. Israel wanted Kennedy gone because he opposed Israel getting nuclear weapons, and then you had the Texas oil billionaires who were threatened by the oil depletion allowance issue. And so all these people got together, and by having so many different players in the conspiracy, they all have plausible deniability. Anytime evidence surfaced pointing the finger of blame in one direction, they would leak evidence pointing in another direction to keep everybody confused as to what was really going on. But assassination and wars are never started for a single reason. There's always a confluence of parties with their own personal agendas that overlap on war or assassination as their solution.
So to drill down just a little bit on that, do you think, how many killers, actually assassins, at the scene do you think there were?
Well, somebody went back and did another analysis of that police recording of the gunshots in Dealey Plaza. The House Select Committee on Assassinations, claiming budget constraints, had only analyzed 4 of the shots, one of which clearly came from the grassy knoll. But somebody later on went back and analyzed the entire tape and discovered that there were at least 5 shooters in Dealey Plaza. There was the shoot team that was on the book depository, probably the 5th floor. There was a shooter in the Daltex building, and there was the shooting team at the grassy knoll, and I forget where the others were.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Switching gears completely to the Trump election.
Yes.
And all of that. I'm thrilled he's in there, and I've been sharing with my friends and people that I know, just what a good job that I think he's going to do. And I think my biggest frustration, and tell me if you agree, is just in the fact that the majority of the public does not get the fact that there is a globalist agenda going on, and they mean business, and it doesn't equate to anything good for people like you and me.
No, and it really doesn't.
Don't understand that for the most part.
Well, I have this genetic defect that keeps me from admiring the emperor's new clothes, and people like me are considered a threat to the system. The globalist agenda, though, is in serious trouble. First of all, most people do understand there's a globalist agenda. Ever since George Bush started talking about the new world, a new world order, and getting rid of the useless eaters. And we have certainly seen the push forward on that with all of this George Soros backing of refugees going into Europe, the open borders agenda here in the United States. But the globalist agenda is in serious trouble. It's certainly falling apart in Europe, and Donald Trump is not on board with that. And of course, the entire push for the global government was originally based on a foundation of 3 pillars. One was a global pandemic requiring a global health authority. That fizzled in 2009 when it turned out the when pigs fly flu was milder than the normal seasonal flu. Then there was, of course, human-caused global warming was a big part of the globalist agenda because we need a global environmental authority that we all surrender our sovereignty to for the sake of Mother Earth. And now, of course, dealing with all the snow and ice, that is bad as well. The third foundation is still in operation, and that is a global economic meltdown requiring our surrender to a global private central bank. And I think that will fail ultimately because people understand private central banking is why all these nations on earth are at the edge of collapse, and more private central banking is not going to fix it. That's kind of like backing up the Titanic and whacking the iceberg from the other side and hoping that closes all the leaks.
The way you described it yesterday about the central banks, I kind of see it like a Ponzi scheme, charging us interest and then expecting the whole thing to work. And the fact that the ultimate fall of the World Bank, because they're trying to interconnect all of these world banks across the world, like you described.
Well, it is a Ponzi scheme, and it's a pyramid, because for the private central bank to perpetuate, there must always be a larger population of new borrowers coming into the bank to allow the bank to create lots of new money, part of which is siphoned off to pay the debt on the old money. And that's why they're always out there trying to get more people on the debt hook, student loans, credit cards, whatever they can do. When they run out of new people to bring into the system, the pyramid collapses. That's what happens with every Ponzi scheme. It reaches a point where they can't find new people to bring into the system in order to prop it all up. And now it's happening all around the globe.
Yes, the way they're so audacious, they think, okay, I'm here, now pay me interest for these pieces of paper that I print and hand to you, without making any investment of their own in the economy. It's just arrogant beyond belief.
It's a legalized counterfeiting operation. And they've been playing this scam on the human race for 300 years because they're always able to have enough money to bribe their way into control of a nation's currency because the leaders of every country would sell their own mother for $1.
You're a clinic, Mike. Thank you for all of everything you share with us.
All right, well, thank you very much for the phone call. Merry Christmas. We're going to let you go here. And we're going to do a shout-out to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And we're talking about immigration. And not too surprisingly, we're hearing from government slaves, the European Union is in response to these acts of Islamic terrorism up there in Berlin. They're calling for more gun control, forgetting that the guy in Berlin used a van. And that issue of gun control is always bizarre because every time there's an act of terror, the government turns around and punishes the people who had nothing to do with it. And it is such an irony because every time one of these refugees commits one of these acts, what's the first thing out of the government's mouth? Oh, well, you shouldn't judge all the Muslims by the actions of this single crazy individual. Why don't gun owners get that same deal? It's the exact reverse. There's a shooting someplace. Oh, all the gun owners are collectively guilty. We've got to take their guns away. And by the way, we just posted a link to a petition. Apparently, one of Obama's last atrocities in office is pushing through this legislation, which adds the Social Security database to the National Gun Registry. In other words, if you're over a certain age and you have certain medical conditions, they will arbitrarily deny you your Second Amendment rights. It's an extension of the bill they passed for veterans, saying that by default, veterans are suffering from PTSD and therefore they shouldn't be trusted with guns. We trusted them with guns when they're killing our enemies. We don't dare trust them with guns now that they're back home, which tells you how afraid this government really is of an armed population. And they ought to be. That's the reason for the Second Amendment, to hold the government in check, to keep the government as public servants rather than public masters. Okay, getting on back to immigration here. Not too long ago, British authorities arrested an Eritrean man claiming he was the world's most wanted people smuggler, and there was headlines all over we've got this guy. And apparently it turned out they got the wrong person. Italian prosecutors have admitted that the suspect is a victim of mistaken identity. They goofed. They absolutely goofed. Now, a little bit of good news. For those of you who, like me, like our privacy, Europe's highest court has declared the British snooper charter to be illegal, ruling that the British government's indiscriminate retention of emails is illegal under the EU Charter. Now, this is going to be short-lived because once Britain leaves the European Union, they can go back to the Snoopers Charter, and there's no higher court to overturn that. Now, speaking of the VA, Donald Trump is vowing to pick up the hotline on VA reform. And definitely I am on board with this. The way our previous governments have been treating our wounded veterans is a disgrace. It's like I mentioned to that other caller, always seems to be money for monuments and statues and things honoring the glory of war. But those people who actually fought in those wars, did the government's and money junkies' bidding, and suffered grievous permanent injury, they're being ignored, neglected. They're just being put on hold, hoping they'll die and go away and cease being a burden. Now, if you are using Groupon to grab some Christmas presents, you might want to check your account for fraudulent activity. And apparently there is a cybercriminal out there who's broken into the system. And millions of users are at risk of having money illegally withdrawn from their accounts. So, strikes me as rather odd. The British government wants to spy on the law-abiding citizens, but the real criminals just go free and clear. Now, there is a Android malware out there called Fake Token. And apparently there's a new version out which, along with stealing all of your banking data off your Android phone, is also a ransomware and encrypts your files on your Android and demands a ransom. 16,000 victims in 27 countries have already been hit. Where's the NSA in all of this? Or is this another fine product of the NSA? We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to take a phone call from Kyle in Pennsylvania. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Well, first of all, I want to wish you a very Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
And thank you. One thing I think that's phenomenal about Trump is that it's not even so much what he has done, but he has allowed people to see how many people are actually awake to what's going on. And I always thought that was the last wall that needed to fall. Is not so much that you know, and I know, and my neighbor knows, and the guys who have it down know, but now we all know that we all know what's going on. And that's an indestructible, you can't stop that. No.
You are right. You are absolutely right. That is a very important thing because one of the big lies that the corporate media was putting out for decades to those of us who were asking questions is, well, you're the only one who's got these doubts. You know, you should stay silent because all your friends and coworkers and everything, they're still on board with the government. And so you have this ridiculous image of a room full of people at a party, and they all know something's gone wrong, but nobody's talking because they think they're the only one. And that was the trap there. And that's why I kept saying throughout the years, the most important thing that you can do is to speak out. And your response is generally going to be, because it's been my experience, you'll get 6 or 7 other voices saying, wow, I thought I was the only person who was seeing all this stuff going on. But at this point, you're right. The American people are awake. They know that their fellow Americans are awake. It is now fashionable and trendy to be doubting the government and the corporate media. And it's only going to be downhill from here for the corporate media and the government.
You know, and I don't want to take away from the tireless work of people like you and many others over the past 30, 40 years, but what Trump represents is an expression of our will and an expression of our power.
Yes.
And now that we've used it, I don't feel as though they're going to be able to manipulate or just push, ramrod things through without there being a legitimate pushback. And that expression, once you do it one time, once you stand up to the bully that one time, you can't get it back.
Well, you're absolutely right about that as well, because all of a sudden the American people have realized that despite all the corruption, despite the corporate media lies, despite the massive election fraud, united together as an American people, we can, in fact, affect a change. Somebody actually sent me an article earlier titled Satan at the White House, which I didn't post for the obvious reasons. And it led off with the question, how could an anti-establishment figure like Donald Trump be allowed to get so far in the election here? And it was a one-word answer, because we, the voters, are sick and tired of the establishment. And you better get used to that idea.
All of that rhetoric, all of that, Trump is racist, Trump is sexist, Trump is Satan, you're sexist, you're racist, it's just white noise now. It just doesn't faze anybody. They push right through it.
They burned it out.
They don't care.
They burned it out. They used it so much, it lost any shock value and meaning. Same thing with Israel screaming anti-Semite at everybody. They've used it so much, it's a null. You're an anti-Semite. Okay. You're a sexist. Okay, maybe. Yeah.
If you accuse enough people of being racist, eventually all the people that you've accused look at each other and say, well, I know you're not a racist. You probably know that I'm not a racist. Okay, this guy here's the one who's wrong, not us.
Yes.
So they're shot. They're done.
Yep.
Finito.
Absolutely. Okay, well, anything else?
You have a wonderful holiday.
All right, same to you.
You have a wonderful holiday.
All right, we're going to let you go and switch over to Larry in Washington. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, did you say anything about that Giuliani Twitter?
Yeah, it's a hoax. It wasn't really Rudy Giuliani. I don't know why they're still out there trying to push this Pizzagate hoax, and I'm sorry so many independent media are picking up on it, because I think it's a setup to try and discredit us and make us look bad, because that's the only tactic the corporate media has against us right now. They can't start telling the truth, and they go on telling lies. I understand pedophilia is a real problem. It's rampant among the elites. But this Pizzagate thing feels like a setup to embarrass us, or worse, open us all up for defamation lawsuits so we can be sued out of existence. Thank you for the phone call. We got to take a commercial break. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take a phone call from Al in Canada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thanks for taking my call, Mike. You're just talking about, the media pushing fake news. Today up in Canada, we have a regulatory body called the CRTC that takes care of the cable companies, telephone and all that. Well, they just deemed internet access a basic service. And, of course, you talked about this in the past. And so basically, they're going to start regulating the internet. They even say as much by saying today's decision signals a fundamental shift in our regulations for basic services from voice-related issues to broadband-related issues. At the same time that they pushed this story, there was a story open up for comment about how to lower your cable bills. And, you get all these fools on there saying, do this and do that. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes.
And so, I post, well, they're going to start regulating this. Why do you think that a VPN cannot be backdoored or co-opted or regulated in some way? Because software and hardware is. These people are nuts.
Yeah.
So I just thought I'd let you know that, you know what?
What?
1984. It's happening.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's a little late, but yeah, they're really pushing for it. All right. Well, Al, thank you very much. Merry Christmas.
Thanks,
Happy Boxing Day. And we're going to let you go. And by the way, as long as we're talking about that, I should mention to you that the RBN broadcast holiday will be next Monday. So it's a live show tomorrow, a live show Friday, and the Lady Claire will be with us. The following Monday will be a pre-record, and the same thing's going to happen presumably over New Year's. Now then, getting on back to computers, interesting story coming out of the Register in Great Britain, where a House committee has said that strong, non-backdoored encryption is vital to the U.S. economy to protect us from cyber criminals, but the federal government should totally be able to crack it. Now, this is a classic case of politicians not having a clue what they are talking about and wanting to have their encryption cake and eat it too. Okay. All right, there we are. Now then, I had to respond to a comment from the control room. Okay, so here's the situation. We already demonstrated here at What Really Happened that real criminals and real terrorists can create new systems of encryption the NSA cannot break. Over the course of a year, we issued 6 encryption challenges. They were very basic, very simple. Not one of them was broken. And the NSA would have been well motivated to crack these codes to demonstrate they could do it to discourage other people from learning how to come up with their own encryption systems. They couldn't do it, so they ignored me with as much dignity as they could muster. And that's why the government backdoors everything. But the cyber criminals find those backdoors and use them to steal our business secrets, to plant malware, ransomware on our computers. So the reality is, if there's strong, non-backdoored encryption out here, it's going to be almost impossible for the feds to crack it. Now, one way they could make their efforts a little more efficient is to stop trying to spy on all the millions and millions of law-abiding citizens out here, allow us our Fourth Amendment privacy, and actually focus their resources on the real criminals. That's what they should be doing. But the real agenda is this federal government is terrified of the American people right now. We're waking up. We're realizing the sheer scale, the massive amount of lying that we have been subjected to by the government and the corporate media. We are now skeptical. We are asking questions. We are doubting what the government says, as we justly should. And the government is now afraid of us. That's why there's this big push to get rid of the Bill of Rights. to silence freedom of speech, to punish us for wrong opinions like they're getting ready to do over in Germany, to take away our Second Amendment rights. And there's a classic case of people thinking from past history. The revolution is already underway. It's happening in cyberspace. It's a virtual revolution. Nobody's pulling out guns and chasing politicians down the road. So they're applying what they think is a solution to the completely wrong area. I honestly do not think we're going to see an armed rebellion in the streets of America. I certainly hope not. I'm working against that. But there is a real revolution. It's happening now. And you are all revolutionaries. When you stop believing as you're told to believe, when you want the truth instead of corporate media lies, then you are part of the revolution. Viva the revolution. Need to get badges or buttons or something out here. All righty. Now then, speaking of security, if you travel a lot, you probably have availed yourself of the aircraft's in-flight entertainment systems and Wi-Fi access. Apparently, those systems are not at all secure. There are serious security flaws in the cabin entertainment systems that are open to abuse. And apparently, these cabin entertainment systems can be taken over by hackers who are on the same plane with you. Apparently, they can access your credit card information. Isn't it amazing what they put on out? I mean, along with everything else that America produces, the quality of our software just isn't there anymore. And part of it, of course, is that companies like Microsoft, in their quest for profits, just don't really care. We will force you to do our Windows 10 upgrade, and who cares if it's got all kinds of problems. And they've had some major mistakes this last year, like the last patch that actually cut some of their servers off the Internet, customer service off the Internet. Another part of it is the current state of software development. Because if you look at all, well, for example, Microsoft and the tools they provide for developing software, you can clearly see they are aimed at corporate software development teams rather than the individual. Now, being an old Linux guru myself, I remember the time where you just edit the code in a text editor, you run the compiler, linker, and you got a working piece of code. And today, it's actually much harder to develop code using the current systems. We've actually taken a step backward. Code development hasn't been this hard since the days of punched cards and plug boards. Because they're afraid of ordinary citizens like you and I being able to write code, as I illustrated with that NSA challenge. Now, a lot of people are Linux fans. I'm one of them. But enough people are now on Linux where it has become profitable for hackers. Remember when Apple Computer for years and years and years was putting out this image, well, we don't have the malware problems Windows does. And they implied it was because the Apple operating system was just superior somehow. That wasn't the case. The reality was there were so few Apple computers compared to Windows computers, it just wasn't worth the bother. And then after Apple gained a much larger market share, now they're dealing with malware. And they're not battle-hardened like us old Windows users. So apparently over in the world of Linux, Adobe apparently reversed a decision to offer an NP API Flash plugin for Linux. And they were going to put out a new one. And apparently it's got problems. Apparently it is simply a rewrite of an older version, which puts in all kinds of more advertising plugins than anything else here. And here's my question. Flash is known to be a major security problem. You can write anything into that action script, to cause damage. That is why we do not use Flash at the What Really Happened website itself. Some of our advertisers do, unfortunately. We will not accept a shockwave file for posting on the website unless it's delivered to us in the original source where we can look at the action script and then compile it ourselves. Because we've been burned by this stuff as well. Now then, if you are living in one of the states that has decriminalized marijuana, you might be able to relax a little bit, so to speak, while driving down the road. They are now discovering states that have allowed medical marijuana or recreational marijuana, for some reason, have lower traffic fatality rates. Partly it may be that people just aren't driving as fast. But as I mentioned earlier in the week to a caller, there was a study that showed very mild use of marijuana allowed people to focus on what they were doing more. Their minds weren't wandering off. And the alcohol companies are still out there screaming, no, you can't legalize marijuana. We've got banker bills to pay, and we need a bunch of drunks to pay the bills for us here. Now, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, but it's worth mentioning again. And by the way, I finally got my copies of Vaxxed, the documentary. I have forwarded them on to various people. I kept one copy in reserve. After Donald Trump is in the White House, I'm going to send this to him, along with my economic analysis of the threat this country faces economically if this exponential growth in autism cases is not dealt with decisively. But there was a study that was looking at homeschooled versus school children, and they discovered they had enough people there to run a statistically valid study on the health of vaccinated children versus unvaccinated children, and they found overwhelmingly the unvaccinated children were healthier. They had healthy immune systems. Their immune systems weren't being compromised by the vaccinations. By the way, I'd like somebody to do a study to correlate the rise of psoriasis, which is an autoimmune disease, with the flooding of vaccines into our society, or the increase in certain kinds of arthritis, which are caused by the body's immune system going out of whack and attacking itself. We may be dealing with a pharmaceutical industry that is actually causing a lot more damage than good, which gets me to this story that came out of WakingTimes.com. Earlier this month, prosecutors in the state of Massachusetts arrested 6 former pharmaceutical executives of Insys Therapeutics Incorporated. Now, they were manufacturing a pain medication called Subsys, which is based on a synthetic opiate called fentanyl. Now, fentanyl is incredibly potent, far more potent than real opium. It's also far more addictive. And apparently these 6 executives set up this operation to incentivize doctors to overprescribe this medication, make sure the pharmacies were fully stocked, literally trying to create addicts to the synthetic opiate to make money. And right now, opioid deaths in the United States now exceed gun deaths. You got to ban the guns, ban the guns. Well, these prescription opioids are killing more people. Oh, but they're good. They're good. We shouldn't do anything about that. Down in Flint, Michigan, they're still dealing with their water issue. And apparently testing is now showed that at least 3,000 other U.S. communities have water coming out of the tap with lead levels higher than Flint, Michigan. Some of them 2 to 4 times higher. This is a major, major problem, and it was all brought about by Flint and presumably these other communities looking for ways to save a few bucks not put certain chemicals in the water supply to protect the pipes from corrosion. Because after all, I'm going to be out of office in another 4 years, and it'll be somebody else's problem to deal with. Now, I'm not a monarchist, but you have to admit there was one upside to ruler for life. They're stuck with the job. They can't make a decision and say, it's not my problem to deal with down the road. Well, yeah, short of death or abdication, it is your problem to deal with. And I sometimes think that we need a mechanism by which our current group of politicians are somehow impacted by the decisions they make even after they leave office. I would like to see all retirement pay for members of the government tied to the average wage or salary of the American workers. So as the country improves, their retirement improves. If the country goes downhill, they suffer as well. That might constrain them to thinking more long-term in coming up with their economic strategies. And that's in the blueprint for the new America, which I will finish in my copious free time. Down at the Popocatépetl volcano, and I know I butchered the pronunciation, apparently the inner crater is now almost completely filled with lava. 3 million cubic meters of lava are waiting to be tossed into the air if that thing were to rip loose. Apparently the ancient volcano under the city of Naples is starting to bulge. Been a lot of quake activity. Maybe the earth is getting ready to say, get off me. Just give a good shake. Get rid of all of us pests here. Now, over at Ceres, the dwarf planet, it's being observed by satellite, the mysterious little white spots all over it. They've discovered that Ceres has water ice in the shadowed areas of its poles. And they're saying there may actually be a subsurface ocean on Ceres that would be liquid. That would be interesting. That's worth a return trip. All right, going to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our show after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Last segment of the program today here. And backstepping to the world of politics. Now that this whole blame Russia, blame the independent media, blame angry white men for Hillary's defeat in the election is fizzling out, Hillary supporters are now turning on themselves, and a lot of attention is now being focused on Huma Abedin, where Hillary's inner circle are now pointing their fingers at her and saying it was Huma Abedin's fault. Huma gave her bad advice. Huma encouraged the bad behaviors. And this, of course, is a very, very risky thing to do with talk of prosecution of Hillary still in the air. Because if that inner circle starts to shatter, there's going to be all kinds of people who are going to be thinking, I need to get to the prosecutors with my evidence now and make a deal, before somebody else gets to the prosecutor with their evidence and makes a deal against me. And the rush will be on. Part of the problem, of course, is that Huma Abedin's husband, Anthony Weiner, inadvertently kicked off the reopening of the FBI investigation with his reckless behavior involving sexually explicit messages to underage girls using the laptop that had formerly been used by Huma Abedin on which those additional State Department emails were found. It's not like Comey could have not done something there. But it wasn't his fault. He was between a rock and a hard place. And he's supposed to be doing his job, not protecting Hillary Clinton. But Huma Abedin is now in the crosshairs of all of these liberal whiners who refuse to deal with the fact that Hillary Clinton lost because of Hillary Clinton. Because of Travelgate, Chinagate, the White House furniture being looted when they left, the Arkansas Development Finance Authority, the Clinton Foundation, pay for play, the constant lies, the cheating of Bernie Sanders in the primary. That's why Hillary Clinton lost the election. It wasn't the emails, it's the corruption. And Hillary's handlers are still living in a dream world where we, the voters, only know what the campaign has said. And we were supposed to just believe it and not go on out and find out for ourselves the real measure of Hillary Clinton's character. Not that we had to work very hard to do it. She kind of rubbed it in our faces. Now, Donald Trump's handlers are still there saying we need to make other issues a priority over the investigation of Hillary Clinton. And they may have their own agendas and reasons for doing that. But apparently there is a growing movement within Donald Trump's administration and supporters saying that we cannot allow an obvious criminal to escape her day in court. And it doesn't have to be a top priority. Trump can say, I'm focused on the economy and building jobs and factories. I'm going to let the Attorney General handle this. And they should. We need to send a message to future generations of politicians. This kind of behavior will not be tolerated in the United States of America. That is part of making America great again. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get out of here. We'll be back tomorrow, Thursday, here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until tomorrow, you are all part of the revolution. Share what you know with everyone that you know. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.